Well, good evening, everyone. We'd like to call our Fayetteville City Council August 16th special meeting to order. We thank those of you who are joining us in the audience, those who will be tuning in to us remotely. Tonight's special meeting, the focus is public safety in our community, and so we thank you for joining us for this very important issue. Item number one is the invocation. As we prepare for prayer, we ask that Council Member Thompson, if he would give us a prayer, if we could stand. Immediately following the prayer, if we could repeat the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Let us pray. Heavenly dear Father, we thank you, dear Lord. We thank you for another day and another chance that we can praise and lift up and magnify your name, Heavenly Father. We thank you for the session that's going to be held tonight, and we thank you for all those who are here in attendance. Let everything be done in your accordance, Heavenly Father, in your will and in your purpose. Now bless us with a humble heart and an open mind that we may be listening and hear of those who are here to give us a presentation of how we can better improve and keep our community a lot safer. Dear Lord, we ask these things in your Son, Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Deacon Thompson, Councilmember Thompson. Councilors, we move to the next item on the agenda. Is item 3.0 is the approval of the agenda. If we can have a motion, Councilmember Thompson, there's a motion to approve, seconded by Councilmember Ingram. Discussion on the motion. All right, Council, I'll look to you for action on this item. Huh? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. I'll stick to council member tonight. All right. All right. All right. So motion carries. I was looking for the display. Motion carries unanimous 7-0 by those voting. Moving to item 4.1, public safety scorecard and update and recruitment retention issues. Council and to the citizens, as you know, public safety is a very important item in the community. We have had a briefing. We get it on a quarterly basis, but we wanted to have a specific meeting tonight with a more detailed, in-depth conversation about where we are. And so item 4.1 is Chief Braden. Also, I think will be followed by Chief Hill or any other members of public safety to address retention and the scorecard update. Chief, how are you?
Okay. So good evening, Mayor, Council. Here to give the public safety discussion and start off the discussion tonight with some updates to our current, where are we at? Public safety initiatives. As we'll talk about our residential camera program. It was put out for proposal with no respondents as of yet. Staff is working to review other options. What we're looking at is potentially the potential for a subject for a reimbursement to see if that would be a legal option for us to pursue that home camera option and that focus. In addition to that, we have the Fusus One business camera program. This program is up and operating at this time. As of today, we have 976 registered cameras. Those would be the ones where people allowed us to see that say I have a camera at this location, or allows us to map those out. And we also have a total of 240 integrated cameras where people have given us access to their the cameras that they have on their property. And those are typically businesses that are operated within our community. Our mental health co-responder program, Cumberland County EMS, who we partner with, they are implementing their own community paramedic program that is focused on providing mental health services to our community. This is a startup program. I know they have at least 2 of their community mental health community paramedics that work towards that mental health issue, and they are operating at this time. And they work with our officers as we encounter situations out in the street or dispatch 911 calls regarding to mental health issues. Yes.
So that the folks in the room can see them. I think we are PDF. Okay, if you'll just give us 1 second. Thank you.
Okay. So to
Just as we go along, or gonna?
We'll let him get so far.
So to recap the residential camera program, we're looking to we had no working bids to work with, so we're looking at doing the reimbursement on that. The Fusus one, to recap, 976 registered cameras. Those are our community cameras that people let us know when we can map those out within our communities, plus the 240 business integrated cameras. Our license plate reader program, we have a total of 60 cameras installed, and I can give you the updates for April, just one second. As of April 2023, they have assisted during April of 2023, 28 misdemeanor arrests, 57 felony arrests, 5 stolen vehicles recovered, 4 vehicles seized, 1 firearm, and as far as contraband, over 179 grams of marijuana, 72.7 grams of synthetics, 11 grams of resin, 2 dosages of oxycodone. But that is just an example of the April. On short notice, I was only able to get, right now we're working on an actual worksheet where we can actually track the actual numbers of everything seized in accordance with our LPR program. Right now, all that information is contained within individual reports. We're seeing a need to collect and correlate that data so that we can give those reports back. Our stationary camera replacement, that is the
Is that in here from the license plate camera of the success we've had?
No, those are just numbers that I brought up.
Yeah, I would like to get those.
Okay.
Thank you.
The stationary camera replacement, the 5-year program, this is replacing the existing pan tilt zoom, not the LPRs. Those are 2 separate camera programs. It's funded and underway for those replacements. Axon Fleet, Taser, body-worn camera, and storage. We did the bundle package for those. We are in the process of installing our Axon Fleets, which also expands our LPR capabilities to the individual police cars as they're out there on patrol every day. That is the final stage of the Axon implementation, and it's ongoing with the storage and the use of the body-worn cameras. The Office of Community Safety, the director position has been advertised at this point, and we're looking towards that hiring process through the manager's office. The assistant to the city manager for public safety, this recruitment has been paused pending the Office of Community Safety director and recruitment process. Cost of gun violence study, staff is vetting the respondent to the RFP. I believe that was put out, and there was only 1 person who actually responded to that. They're vetting that respondent to ensure that they would be capable of providing what the ask was on that report, and we'll be back to in the near future have an outcome for that or repost it. Our mental health co-responder program, like I said earlier, that we're working with Cumberland County EMS, who have the community paramedics, is implementing their program. Where they have at least 2 community paramedics and a caseworker that works with them. They respond at the request of the PD in assistance to 911 calls, plus they do preemptive follow-ups with individuals within our community they know suffer from mental illness. The PROVE program, the contract is now managed out of the city manager's office, currently revising the contract to include refined KPIs and deliverables. Impact reduction programs underway transitioning to economic and community development. Sound thinking, as we know, was formerly known as ShotSpotter. The implementation is underway. Last check, we're having weekly meetings to keep us abreast of the progress of that. I want to say that we were Major Joyce, 10% installation at this point. 50%, and I had to refer to Major Joyce because that is in progress and that actual number is changing every day. Support to the sound thinking areas, staff has conducted a thorough analysis of the areas and recommends the use of existing programs at no or low cost. This was based on the request, I believe, from Council Member Benavente about the support that we could provide to those ShotSpotter areas, that, as we identified them as areas for the need for ShotSpotter. And we're working with economic and community development to provide those services. So all
right, Chief, I did have a couple of questions coming in. I have Councilmember Hare and then Hondros, but before we do that, Be remiss if I didn't recognize some other elected officials in the audience. Have Commissioner Veronica Jones, Cumberland County Commissioner. Welcome, ma'am. And also Vice Chairman Glenn Adams from the County Commission. Any other elected officials here? Thank you, Commissioner Adams, for joining us. All right. Did have a couple of questions. Start with Councilmember Harry and then Hondros.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm trying to see through what has been presented the right place to ask that question, but I guess we can look at the mental health slide, and it's my understanding it was discussed, but because I did receive some calls about the incident that, and please let me know the table here or if this is where I need to ask this, of the homeless issue that we had downtown, and I said that I would ask a question about it. Is this the right place?
Not at this time.
Not this time.
We'll circle back to that if
All
you
right.
can.
Thank you, Mayor.
All right. Councilmember Hondros and then Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chief, could you put the previous slide up? I think it was slide 5, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't have
The
what
one
is-
that had the PROVE program, mental health.
Right there.
Co-responder
Yes,
PROVE,
sir.
and then impact reduction. The transition from the PROVE program, when was that made?
the transition.
The change, you said it's now managed, the slide says it's now managed by the city manager's office. When did that transition occur? Do we know?
So I know that the initial funding for that was actually put up by the police department, but it was actually the PROVE project is an independent entity, is separate and apart from the police department. It has never been a part of the police department. It has never been truly run or managed by the police department. We just put that funding forth to get that initiative started, and now it falls under the city manager and over at City Hall.
Okay. Anything to add, Manager Hewitt? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Thompson and then Benavente.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chief, I have a question about the LPRs. I understand that technology is now the new way of trying to collect catch a lot of criminals who are roaming the streets through license plate readers and everything else. My question would be is, have you thought about moving that program west? Do you have enough LPRs? And my final question would be is, I think 295 extension would be an escape for a lot of the criminals that's probably in the western part of Fayetteville, with Fort Bragg being in the middle, the city, Fort Bragg, the city, and the county. Have you collaborated with Fort Bragg to put LPRs somewhere in that location so we can still track them?
So it's almost like you were in our ComStat meeting this morning. One of the things we truly discussed was how 295 impacts crime within our area. We know that the opening of 295, it joins, the north side to the west side in a matter of minutes. I came from a meeting at the Bill Christie Center back to the downtown, and it took me over 35 minutes to travel. I could have hit 295 and been over on the north side of Fayetteville in probably about less than 10 minutes. So we realized that is an actual avenue of a mode of transportation that sort of is in a no man's land, if you will. Is the Highway Patrol patrolling 295? Is Fort Bragg patrolling 295? Is the city patrolling 295? We actually have some LPRs that do cover the exits as you come off of 295 and enter the city. But the conversation this morning was more centered around the fact that we have a new technology in the Axon fleet camera that gives it an actual LPR capability. So basically, we have LPRs wherever we have a police car that is equipped with that Axon fleet camera. So what I asked for the captains is to have a cooperative effort between the districts to ensure that we're getting these new fleet cameras out there to see what kind of hits we're getting from the LPRs. Are we having vehicles that are stolen on the north side of town driven over to Foxfire? And what we want to do is try to track and see, what is the need, and we'll respond based on that need and the evidence that we get back from these not body cameras, but the fleet cameras. What we've also doing is knowing that the west side, out towards the Gillis Hill area, there are fewer of those. We're going to concentrate that area as well to see where potentially we're getting the most hits based on the cameras that we're out there on patrol with, and decide whether we ask for that funding for an actual stationary camera as needed. But I think what it's done is the new fleet camera option has given us the ability to test that theory of where do we need to put these actual cameras at and where would we get the most responses.
Can I have a follow-up, Mr. Mayor? I believe you briefed a few months ago the price of an LPR. I think you said around $15,000. Do you have the funding to provide all the LPRs that you need?
Right now, we have the existing system that is set in place, and I believe we're on year 3 of a 5-year contract. So yes, we have the funding for what we have. Like I said, I'd like to evaluate and vet the information we're getting from this new technology in the fleet cameras to make that determination whether I need to make an ask for additional actual LPR, stationary LPRs.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Benavente.
Thank you, Mayor Colvin. The FUSIS business camera program, Chief, I've had folks just reiterate their concerns about circumventing the traditional warrant process, and I know that the way that we set this program up, we know where they are, so we can ask, and certainly they can offer it should they desire to, but it's certainly nothing that we compel them to do.
So that's correct. Remember, I gave you 2 sets of numbers, 976 registered cameras. Those are our community members that freely and voluntarily came forth and said, hey, I have a security camera or some system attached to my house. If something goes on in my neighborhood, feel free to come by and knock on my door because I have a camera that may help you with your investigation. And the other 240 integrated cameras, those are through partners throughout our community that have volunteered us to allow us to have access so we could have real time to provide that real time response and collect data that would help us solve crimes that may be committed on their properties.
That latter half, I guess their businesses you mentioned and other partners, that is something that you're able to tap into with sort of permission already been given for real-time, live.
So each one of those are individual. There's certain permissions that they may grant, and there may be limitations to those agreements. So we have an agreement with each one of those stakeholders as to what permissions we have for that group of cameras.
If there was ever a mistake in exceeding the permissions given on a particular agreement, is that something that the chief's office, you and your assistant chiefs sort of manage and maintain and deal with?
So that's not even controlled by that. That is actually controlled by the stakeholder on what permissions they grant to us. Mm-hmm. So if there was, I would say that they're in control of what they give us access to, so there wouldn't be a mistake of an officer or detective accidentally, overextending the expectations of the business owner. It's the permissions that they grant to us.
Thank you, Chief. And City Manager Hewitt, I know that we were saying on slide 4 that the assistant to the City Manager for Public Safety is pausing pending OCS Director recruitment. What's the logic there?
Just looking at some of the overlapping skills that we had posted the assistant to the city manager, and we had a number of applicants, but only 1 or 2 of them actually met the minimum requirements. And we have invited all of those folks who did apply for the assistant to apply for the Office of Community Safety. Based on first initial blush, I think that it is a much richer candidate group.
And as it relates to the cost of gun violence study, I know that we're having to put that RFP back out there. Are we doing anything different as far as casting our net in a different way, or?
We definitely would welcome any suggestions and publicity we can to get takers. When we looked at the similar studies around the country, they were a more collaborative approach to putting the studies out. So you would have had the health department, or you would have had regional groups.
Right.
The one firm that we had a response from, after trying so often, when we only received one response, we had requested they give us a statement of qualifications that would allow us to say that they actually have the expertise to do it versus just taking the money. And they have not been responsive to that, which we believe in certain parts kind of answers that initial hesitation that staff had. But clearly the study that you gave us out of Western United.
Don't think about it.
Keep cutting it off, Mayor. We're going to keep cutting it off. Right. Okay, thank you. But we understand it's important, and based upon the study that you shared with us, we think that a study like that does have a lot of value. It's not for lack of staff effort, but we do believe probably we will need to put it back out, and it may even be something that, based on where we are with the OCS director, that we might actually have them help inform that a little bit more.
The mental health co-responder program through the EMS service, Chief Braden, is that going to be a feature or a factor of future quarterly reports once we've given it time to bring back some data?
So I can figure out a way to incorporate that, yes, based on referrals that we make to that the community paramedic program, and that would be something that we could I could gather through that 911 center. Yes.
And last question, Mayor Colvin. Sorry about the many inquiries. The Economic Community Development Department, my understanding is, and feel free to clarify if I'm incorrect, has done some research into these 3 different radiuses based on sort of available data. Are there plans to do less quantitative and more qualitative study, and maybe going so far as like going door to door talking to folks? Is that something that we can look forward to get even more information about what these areas truly need?
Well, what we can do is we can definitely bring that back. We actually have a whole presentation that captures that in the interest of time.
Understood.
But we can definitely program that for the September work session. Kelly, if that'll work, we can definitely do that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilman Benavente, to pivot off of that, Mr. Manager, have we checked with Harvard Bloomberg Institute? They do studies for cities all the time, do the research. So I'm sure they have it. They do it nationally, and they always look for cities to participate.
We will definitely look them up. We were, as you know, a participant in one of their past studies as well. We'd be happy to do that.
Yeah, they did the Pathways to Prosperity and some other things. So, Chief, as we go through, let me go back to your numbers that we didn't recap tonight. So basically, on your gun seizures, because the focus tonight, a lot of it is about guns that are on our streets. So your gun seizures are up 30% compared to last year. Is that right?
Yes, sir. So I have the 2022 numbers up here for you to see, and the 2023 current numbers. Those were current as of the meeting that I presented this slide of.
Right. So you seized about 770 versus 595 last year. But the weapons stolen are down, which was a big piece to it. So you've gathered
Correct.
more that were on the street, but the thefts are down but it's just a slight decrease, almost 10%.
Yes, sir.
So you think people are getting the message about locking their cars, being more aware? What would you attribute that to? Have you all ran into any of that, or are they not reporting it, or what would you say?
No, I would say that, we have had a campaign ever since I've been an assistant chief of the gun violence. And part of that talk has always been about securing your guns. I know there's council members that have had meetings where they talked about securing your weapons, whether it's through gun locks, whether it's taking them out of your cars. It's been a message that we provided through our PIO's office, provided on our Facebook page, our social media platforms. And I would be really interested to see how the year closes out. Those numbers are subject to fluctuate, but I'm happy with the way that they're trending thus far into this year. And if we can get less guns stolen, that means that there's less guns out there within the illicit population that would use them towards a violent means.
Right. Okay. And the final question I have on the doorbell cameras, I know brought this request to council probably a year and a half, 2 years ago, to see if there was a way that we could give either low to moderate or seniors the doorbell cameras themselves. Do you know where we are on that, Mr. Hewitt? I know we were looking for some grant money with one of the building supply stores or Home Depot or someone that was doing it. Where are we with that?
Yes, Mayor. We can definitely also add that to the September work session, but from memory, what we ran into was giving people the doorbell camera, and we, I think, had identified using with the city attorney's office that state law does allow us to do things for seniors and for people to low to moderate, for low income. And it may be, I think I've said that correctly, Madam Attorney. There may be opportunities for us to do that, but where the doorbell cameras ran into the hiccup was in finding, number one, a technology that was reliable, who would install it, making sure that people had internet, and all of those other associated things that go into having a doorbell camera if you have one. Just as we saw, legitimate questions that have been asked by counsel in the community about what was formerly ShotSpotter and about Fusus One, what does that look like? But we've not given up on that, but we were unable to find, number one, a camera solution, and then identify how we would deploy them and have them all connected and stuff like that. But that is, we can definitely bring that back as well in September.
Yeah,
like
'cause
what
that
we
one
did.
has been out there for a while, particularly with MetroNet doing free internet and Wi-Fi. In some places, you have, maybe every senior or low-income person may not have it, but a lot may. And then also that may encourage people to utilize the voluntary sign-up registration for the other number that you had. So if we can circle back to us on that, Mr. Manager, please.
We'll add that to September.
All right. So Councilmember Ingram and then Hare and Benavente.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Chief. So
Good evening.
I want to, so I got two different questions. One, do we track or know if guns are coming from the military base?
So let me make sure I'm understanding your question correctly. Are they personally owned guns from military members? Is that where?
Yeah,
is
I
that-
guess we can use that one.
So what we do is, yes, on any incident report that we have, there is a box that we can indicate whether it's military related. But that I would say that probably is not the most accurate information because that's not the most pertinent information in some of those investigations when they're looking for those. But I could take a look into that and get back to you to see what numbers we do have available.
Okay, and then secondly, so I know that there is, in the press conference that was had about a month ago with the federal government where it was mentioned about a switch that you could create through 3D printing, and it would change the function of a gun into a automatic.
Yes.
Okay. Are we able to track the access to the 3D printers or manufacturers of these printers? Are we able to?
So we are aware of the presence of those within the community, and we are conducting investigations that are appropriate. They still fall within the guidelines of us developing probable cause to initiate search warrants, to initiate arrest warrants, and things of that nature. So, I think what you're asking is, do we have a way of finding who's downloaded that 3D image? Is that what you're asking?
Correct.
I think that is going to be one of those where we have to develop probable cause and be able to get those search warrants or court orders to obtain that information. It's not just something that we could go and look for on the internet.
Okay, and then for people that may not know or listening on this, can you talk about that briefly, the switch?
So basically, it's just a aftermarket piece that can be added to a gun that turns the semi-automatic sear within a semi-automatic handgun and restricts that sear from engaging to keep it in a semi-automatic mode. But since that sear is disengaged, it creates that gun to be a fully automatic gun. So as long as that trigger is depressed, it will continue to fire rounds. So that is a federal firearms violation. That is an offense that's not allowable to the general public for possession or to apply to any of their personal guns. So anytime they're in possession of that or they apply that to one of their personal weapons without the proper licensing, then it does become a federal firearms violation.
And this is being made with a 3D printer.
That have been made with 3D printers, correct?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Let's see who hasn't spoken. Councilmember Banks McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Chief. I do have a few questions. I guess this probably be towards the city manager. As far as the cost, the gun violence study, what is the time frame? Because I know we've been working on that for some time, and I think in order for us to be effective, we need that study, especially when we're putting money towards initiatives. So what are we?
Well, we got busy on that once it was a council interest, and we have been unable to find anyone who was able to do the study for us when we put it out to bid. And so we will definitely follow up on the mayor's suggestion of the Bloomberg Harvard folks. But we had tentatively set aside, I think, for the one bid we received, we thought that was going to be about $30,000. And so money is not the issue at the moment. It is actually finding someone who has the expertise to come in and give us the information. The cost of the gun violence study that we received, the one from Western United States, really looked at not only the economic impact, but the community impact of crime, particularly related to guns throughout the community. To my knowledge, there aren't many of those that we've seen in North Carolina. The closest that we come to that is that the health department on a regular basis puts together a kind of state of the community health, where they talk about the impacts of a variety of things on the community health and wellness of people in the community. I don't remember if Vice Chairman Adams and others remember, but it was, I think it came out in the last 12 months or less. But there did not appear to be, when we put it out, people who had the expertise or the willingness at that time to do just the gun violence. But we are going to redouble our efforts, particularly with the lead that the mayor gave us.
Yeah, because we know that there's no one solution thing, but we need to find the root causes regarding gun violence here in our community. Also for the FUSES camera, is that already in the works? Because I know we've talked
Yes.
about that for some.
So again, there's 976 registered cameras that are owned by homeowners that have voluntarily come and asked us to register them to map those out within our community, and 240 that we have integrated through community business partners across the city.
Okay, and so for those who are tuning in or in the audience, if someone is interested, how do they go about,
So there should,
and how much is it? How much does it cost?
and to register your camera, if you're at home, not a dime. You let us know that you want to let us to be aware that you have that availability, and we will get you the paperwork to get you signed up to that. For our community partners in the business sector, it depends on, how many cameras we're talking about. Those are things that we would have to talk to you one-on-one. You can either at your nearest community watch meeting, or reach out to your district captain, or email me directly, and I'll get you put in the right direction to get you signed up for any of the programs that we talk about tonight.
Okay, and then also with those cameras, you can ring different cameras, it's just having an ability to connect it or register with that, so you can have any type of camera system. Is that correct?
So yes, for the personal cameras that are located out in our community, anything that you have, we will cut. It just lets us know that there's a camera there. So if we have a shooting that occurred on your block, we can knock on your door and say, hey, we saw that you have a camera registered with FUSES. Was it operating on? And then we'll go through that investigative process with you there and get those proper permissions, or let you view it and get back to us and tell us what you saw or didn't see.
Okay, and I just want to encourage the residents to utilize this. That's one solution that we can help with as it relates to crime. Two more questions, Mayor, if it's okay. With the assistant city, the requirement for the position, what credentials or what are the requirements, city manager?
For the Office of Community Safety?
Yes.
I don't have that at the moment, but we can definitely, it's available on the city's website, the background and credentials, and we can, I can ask one of my staff members, Jeff, to pull that up while we, our next part is on recruitment and retention, and by the time we finish with that, we'll be able to tell you and anyone who's watching what the requirements are. And
that'd be great. One more thing with ghost guns, because we know that's been going on with, here in the United States. And it's hard to track those guns because of the not having serial numbers, and that's how individuals build these guns. Has there been an uptick here in Fayetteville with ghost guns, or are there been a lot of crimes committed using these guns?
I would have to say no. That is not a prevalent issue within our community today. Typically, I have counterparts that work for larger cities. We see a lot of ghost guns and the reoccurrence of their use in cities that have more restrictive gun laws and possession laws, laws to purchase, things like that. So, no, we haven't seen a particular problem with ghost guns within our community, and at this point, no.
Okay, thank you. That's all. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Go to Councilmember McNair. She's first time speaking.
Oh, is it? Oh, thank you. I just have one question, Chief Braden. You mentioned the gun locks?
Yes.
Yeah. Where can we find those?
So we have reached out. We have a limited supply. We give out on our movie nights and things of that nature. And I know that you have inquired about having a thing where you were able to give out gun locks as well. But the limited supply we do have now, we do take out to our movie nights. Anywhere we have up our crime prevention displays, we generally have a couple there to hand out to individuals. And I'm still working on your request.
Yeah, all right. Thank you, sir.
All right. Now we'll go to Councilmember Hare and then Benavente.
Thank you, Mayor. Once again, Chief, thank you. As we go back and look over at your spot shotter locations, and thank you. I'm glad to hear that we're up to 50%. Hear a lot of positive success throughout North Carolina. I've heard it in Raleigh, I've heard it in Winston, and even in Goldsboro. So that's a big thumbs up. When will we be at 50%? When will you think we will be up and running?
So we had the last meeting that I attended, it was about 2 weeks ago. We're up to the weekly meetings now. I think by the end of September, the first week or so in August, end of August, we should be up and running, and that's 100% all 3 locations.
Sound Thinking is continuing to work with local energy providers like PwC, as well as Duke Energy. They've had a couple of issues with Duke Energy, but they're not letting that stop them from going live for our target date at the end of the month, which is going to coincide with Sound Thinking personnel being on site to provide training to our staff.
Now, then you may be somewhat leading into what I was thinking. So do we have dry runs, test runs before we actually move forward live in our city? I mean,
So
how's
yes,
that going to be done?
like anything, we have that checklist of things before you hit that go live button. They'll do their own QA, quality assurance checks of those things, and we'll have all of our training in place prior to we go live and start responding as a shot spotter response with police cars driving blue lights and sirens. So yes, we will do the appropriate Q&A checks. We'll make sure that everything is working live. The dispatch is receiving those alerts, that we are on the proper route to transmit those out and dispatch those accordingly, and we give a proper response from our patrol officers.
And I guess it's just a no-brainer for me to ask, you have been having those conversations with our peer cities or cities that have been using this technology and the positive that they've been receiving from it. You have been having those kind of discussions?
Yes. So even if we find out that yes, we're getting a 911 call in addition to a shot spotter, what that does is it corroborates the information that we're getting from that 911 call. So as police officers, someone who's investigated crimes throughout my career, we're always looking for corroborating evidence. That way it doesn't look like we could have had a mistake or we could have made, a false positive in a situation. So yes, I think even with ShotSpotter, if we get an alert from ShotSpotter, we get several 911 calls from people within that area,
Right.
That information will corroborate one another and show that yes, and it should help me paint a better picture for you as a council as to why we're in certain areas doing the things that we do and answer a lot of the questions that you may have.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Chief. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Benavente.
Yeah, at the risk of rehashing some of the debate we had about ShotSpotter, I'm certain you're also making sure that you're not just going and responding to purely ShotSpotter responses, because you wouldn't have that corroboration from other 911 calls. I guess I know that you're somebody who's got a lot of experience in the field and is going to be able to judge whether or not this is a redundant system or not, because certainly $200,000 a year, I'd rather it go into the pockets of our officers than a redundant system if our citizens are actually calling 911. But I'll digress from there. Are 3D printed switches actually a problem? You know, Councilmember Bags McLaughlin asked about the ghost guns, and that's not an issue here, even though it's in the news nationally. Are you picking up a lot of these 3D printed switches?
So we have made seizures of some of those, and there are open investigations on some of the follow-up investigations on those seizures.
Is it significant?
I would say anytime we have a fully automatic weapon in the hands of, you know, someone who's wanting to commit violence in our community, yes, it is very...
A significant number of them, I'm saying.
I would have to get back to you with a true and accurate number. I don't have that available with me right now.
Car thefts, guns being stolen from unsecured in vehicles was a big issue previously. I know we've made some progress on that. Is that still the number one means that guns are getting into hands of young people?
Yes. Well, I would say yes, as without the data to support that yes, we know there are a significant number of guns that are left unsecured and stolen, and we know that that there is a portion of juveniles that are responsible for a lot of those door handle pulls and motor vehicle B&Es.
There was a shooting at Circle K, and I guess there was a teen club where there was a shooting as well. And we didn't release any press releases regarding those. Do we do that exclusively for homicides, or what is the decision making when it comes to what shooting incident gets a press release?
So typically all homicides we will do a press release on. You know, we release that to the media, we release that to the council as well. Any significant shooting, you know, we took a look at Seabrook. That wasn't a homicide, that was just an actual shooting, an aggravated assault. But based on the incident itself, we knew that that was going to garner significant attention from the community and from the media. Yes, we did do a press release on that one, so to answer questions before they arose. So I think, you know, that is how we sort of gauge what we do the press release on is based on some of those factors.
And the very last question, sir. When people are getting switches on their weapons or, you know, acquiring as many firearms as they can, and certainly we're saying based on the radius that we're putting the shot spotter that, you know, those 3 locations in particular are, you know, sort of hot spots for that kind of activity. You know, and from your experience, you don't need to back it up with data, just from your time being chief and working in the city, you know, what is unique about those areas that makes people feel like this is what they need? Because I know for a fact that there's people all over the city of Fayetteville that have guns, that carry firearms in their homes, and it's unlikely that folks, perhaps in other parts of the city, are going to use them on their neighbors. But there's something about these 3 spots that we're saying that the only way they seem to feel safe is when they have these and are able to use them. Can you speak to that at all?
I would say this. I would say, as I look at social media, I see more people displaying guns than ever before. I think it's a cultural thing that encourages other people within who are in that network, whether they follow that individual on that social media connection, whether they know that person from the community. But, you know, it's sort of a status that we've established in our society. I think that, you know, that the use of weapons has proliferated to the point where I've heard people say this 1,000 times. In the old days, we would just went out and fight. There's no fighting anymore. It's straight to the gunplay. So, you know, and I think, you know, like I said, social media helps perpetuate that problem by sensationalizing kids with guns, people posing with guns, things of that nature. Are there some root problems that in the communities that we talk about, the 3 that are highlighted on the map? I would say yes. You know, when I was trying to become chief of police, I said if there's a couple things that I could do away with, it would take away probably 80-90% of police work. That's mental health, poverty, addiction. Okay, these are all things that influence the cycle of violence that occurs within our community. So I'm not sure exactly what answer you were looking for, but those are all things that contribute to the problem that we see today.
No, I appreciate that, Chief, because Mayor Colvin, I know that, you know, we're in this chamber as opposed to where we usually have our work session and can kind of have more informal conversation about this, because, you know, I just think about when I have, not to say that I have, but if I had a dispute with my neighbor, you know, if we really wanted to hurt each other, we're calling the police on each other, we're suing each other, you know, we're sort of using all of these other mechanisms, if you will. Now, what is it to say that other areas aren't relying on those systems and instead are taking it upon themselves to deal with the problem personally. I think there's something to be said about that fact. And then what we can do to, change that, I think, we have to first, I guess, identify it as such. They're not relying on 911 to come here and help me fix my problem, because if that happens, maybe we're all going down. We're all going to get in trouble for something. So I can't call that number. I can't afford to fight this out in court, so I'm not going to the courthouse. I'm not getting an attorney. So if we can say that, that's the case, I think, we're going back to now, what else can we do for those red circles to find out what it is, what it is that's going on. So I think that's part of what today is about, is having that kind of conversation. So I appreciate you, Chief, for contributing to that, and you sharing some insight there.
Thank you, Councilman Benavente. Councilmember Jensen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Chief. There's just a few things that I would like to say and kind of point out. A lot of things tonight, we have been down this road and we've been working this road for about the last 3 years, when the world changed on us real quick. And, trying to put a lot of things in our toolbox to be able to help make it a safer place, our city be a safer place. So what I see tonight is, for us, a lot of it is review, but I do see that we are educating our residents and out here showing everything that we have done to put in our toolbox to try to make a difference, and that we are having the conversations and we are trying to be informed and we are out at other peer cities talking to them. I personally learned something by Councilmember Ingram tonight, just by us all sitting here having the conversations. So I'm going to take this one step further, and I might get in trouble for doing it, but as Commissioner Adams is getting ready to walk out the door, please don't leave. I am, and I have the other commissioner here, Ms. Jones, I'm sorry. I would like to do this in 2 months. I would like to do this same thing, but I would like to have the county here. I want to hear about mental health. I want to hear what the county is doing. I want to hear what the hospital is doing. I want to hear what the schools are doing, and I want to hear what the court systems are doing. This isn't a trial for anybody, but I think we all need to have this conversation so we can all learn instead of being in silos. And that is the only way that we're going to get out of this. We're never going to get out of being a Tier 1 county until we all sit down and have the conversation together. So I am asking that that happens in the next 2 months. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chief, I appreciate your presentation. And one of the things that I try to do in my communities, and you've been involved in a lot of my chat and choose and community watches, and that is to educate our residents on, if you see something, say something. That's one way we can start combating what goes in our communities. We can't control guns. The only thing we do is make people responsible for the guns that they do have. And I'm glad to hear a lot of my fellow council members talk about the FUSIS program, because it is very important that we relay that information out to our residents. But it's not just for business, and it's not just for residents. Chief, can you explain to them it's also for communities if you have one that's in and out of your community?
So yes, there's a lot of communities that are up and operate under HOAs today. We will work with whatever HOA is out there to help you get access or link us up with individuals in your community that may want to sign up for our camera registration, or if you as an HOA, as a business, want to provide a camera that covers the entrance to your property. Again, we caution we have no interest on peering on houses inside the property, but if it's an interest of that HOA to say, hey, this is it, we have a camera that covers our entrance that shows the people who come and go from our community, we were willing to work with you guys and see how FUSIS could be integrated for your use.
Thank you, Councilman Ingram.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think Councilmember Benavente brought up a really good point as it relates to do people know what to do? especially if like we're talking about as my neighbor, if I want to hurt my neighbor, I'm going to call the cops on him, right? So a part of this is what I hear and what I know to be in the community of what's going on. For the very vast majority, a lot of these are teenagers. A lot of them are teenagers. Would you agree? Or a lot of what we're seeing are teenagers. Would you agree? Or within that age, coming out
Yes,
of teenagers.
teenage to young adult.
To young adult, okay. So here's what happens, and I can vouch for this because I had a teenager in my home who just graduated. They're on their games, playing Call of Duty, what's the other one? Grand Theft Auto. And this is a generation that grew up with this. They don't know to call the police for instances like that. They know to call the police if somebody, their mama get hurt, right? Or their dad, they don't know to call the police for in terms of an altercation. What they do know from what a game has taught them, because they have free will in a game, oh, I can grab this weapon, I can go out in the street, and I can handle it myself. Would you think that is what we are seeing?
I would say, yes, we're seeing people that are less likely to get the police involved and more likely to handle situations on their own.
Okay, so when you are out having the conversations, or do we have entities that help us have the conversation about reality versus what you're playing on a game? Because obviously, and this is not, I don't think this is a disrespect to the parent, because there are various reasons why there may not be a present parent, and there may be a present parent, and that child still decide they're going to do whatever they do. Are we exercising that voice to say, these are the differences of the reality?
So let me answer it with this. Yes, we are taking every opportunity, whether it's go to talk to a Girl Scout group, whether it's go out and have a safe space to play for kids, to carry our message about how to avoid violence. Okay, I would say that if looking back on the incident that occurred at Seabrook, had 911 been called prior to the first shot being fired, what could have changed? Could a police car have pulled down that street and made people get in their cars and leave? I don't know, because that wasn't what was done that day. But I would like to know, okay, yes, that if we had more involvement, more people calling 911 when they see that verbal altercation that they see getting out of hand, could the presence of a police officer have changed that outcome? Yes, we're going. I talked earlier when I gave the initial presentation. I had been out at Seabrook the prior week for our youth camp. I'd been out there the previous Friday for our safe space to play. I was out there the night before for National Night Out. It's not that we weren't present at Seabrook. It's not that we haven't passed our message to Seabrook. Mm-hmm. It's that no one chose to call 911, right, but they chose to pull out guns.
See, okay. Thank you.
Councilman Benavente.
Thank you, Mayor Colvin. I just want to make sure we're taking the right message from what the chief just said, because you shared that with us at the last meeting as well. There is no criticism that we can put on the police department who does PAL, who is in that area all the time. I think, we all learn about in a classroom, there's different kinds of learners. Some kids can learn because the teacher just said it and they learned it. Some kids got to work with their hands. Some kids got to work with, different types of learning. And I think we've exhausted what the police are capable of doing for the ones that are willing to listen and work with them in that way. So we've got a whole nother subsection of folks that are just never going to hear it from a person with a badge. It's just not going to happen. So this is why we are looking at an Office of Community Safety. We're looking at the PROVE project. We're looking at different folks to get involved, because it's just painfully obvious that some folks just aren't going to call the cops. They see something, they're just not going to say something. It's why at your church you've got a youth pastor, because as much as you love to get the best advice from the head pastor, the young person's just not going to talk to the head pastor. Even though if the head pastor was there, he would have the best advice and he would fix everything if he had only known. They're just not going to talk to him. So if we keep sending the head pastor, we're going to keep losing those young people. So at a certain point, we've got to cut off this total dependence on the police department, and then keep scratching our heads at why haven't they been able to, suddenly do magic? Why haven't they suddenly been able to reach kids that have just not been able to ever get reached? I think we're starting the new strategies, but I just want to make sure that that's the message we're getting. It's not to blame them for not doing enough. I think they've done everything they can.
All right, thank you, Councilman Benavente. Council, we're going to have to push forward. We still got recruitment retention, but I do want to add something to what you're saying. I think everybody is hitting it, but there was a mindset that there's a breach of trust between the police and the community. So there were often things that didn't get brought to the police that you dealt with in those communities, right or wrong and indifferent. That was just how it is because you didn't call the police into every confrontation. Difference now is that they all have access to some very dangerous weapons that are coming into play. I do think at the end of the day, those avenues you mentioned can be a conduit to get information to the police. They may want to speak to another member of the community or someone a little closer to their age. But if it's an enforcement issue, I think the police have to get the information at some point. Because I wouldn't want to see a teenage mentor or someone like that trying to intervene into something without law enforcement if there are dangerous weapons involved. So, I think there's a way that we've got to open that channel of communication up. We've got to build that trust up. But you do have to have enforcement when you have dangerous things like guns with switches and high-capacity rifles and that kind of thing. So,
there's a subsection of that emergency, but there's also
Sure. So I think we're saying the same thing. All right, Councilmember Banks McLaughlin.
Thank you. This is just for those who are not aware. I know just like we mentioned as far as people not contacting our officers when things arise. And I think one of the issues people think is that, oh, well, if I say something, for the young folks, I'm snitching, or that people in the community will know that it came from them. But I do want people to know that we have, you can contact 911 anonymous. You can even also text 911, those issues. So I just want people to know that when you call 911, it can be anonymous. They don't have, the community don't have to know that it's coming from you. And we need to take advantage of that if we want to protect and try to keep our community safe. So I just wanted to make that statement. Thank you.
And I'd also like to plug our longstanding partners with Crime Stoppers. If that's another avenue. If you don't want to remain anonymous, but you want to let us know, hey, this group is getting ready to be violent against this group, or this person is running around with a gun with a switch. These are all things that, avenues to relay that information.
All right, thank you, Chief. All right, Chief, you still have the second part to this retention, recruitment, and we'll try to move on to, is the fire department presenting tonight?
1 second. Thank you, Mayor and council members. We're actually going to have start with HR Director Jerry Clipp,
Okay.
who's going to talk about very briefly how we orient HRD and our pillars that we have here for how we manage our workforce. And then we'll be followed up by Fire Chief Mike Hill, and then we'll have Police Chief Braden come back.
Good evening, Mayor,
Yes, sir.
City Council. Appreciate being here. I'm kind of moderating this section of the discussion tonight, and I wanted to begin by talking a little bit about what we're seeing nationwide with employment. I was reading some statistics today. We know this is a job seekers market, and it still is a job seekers market, and it hasn't been that way for a long, long time. But I was reading some statistics. 52% of our workers considered changing jobs. This is nationwide again. 44% had plans in place to make that switch. 75% of recruiters have experienced candidates changing their minds before actually being hired, and we're seeing a lot of that also in what we're doing. 72% of employers find it difficult to acquire skilled workers, and we're finding that as well. And then lastly, 4.7 million more jobs are available than people to fill them in the United States. So there's quite a big gap there. And, we have some unique issues and problems that we're trying to address here regarding recruitment and retention, but also understand that it's just nationwide. It's just a really tough market right now. So we're going to turn some time over to, as Mr. Hewitt said, we're going to allow the Chief Hill to come up and talk a little bit about some statistics and information that he has from the fire department, and then we're going to turn it back over to Chief Braden to talk about the information he has with the police department with staffing, and then I'm going to come back up and kind of bring everything back together.
Good evening, Chief.
Hey, good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for the opportunity to really recap some information you've heard before and also share some updated information. I stood here in November of last year during our quarterly presentation and told everybody that our inability to retain employees was exceeding our ability to recruit and train employees. We talked about record high attrition. We talked about record low number of applicants. It was just become more difficult to keep firefighters in the seats, you know, the fire trucks. The only way we were successful last year in sustaining the, you know, exemplary level of service we're accustomed to is over reliance on our overtime budget. We more than doubled it, you know, last year doing so. I also told everybody that, just as Director Clip mentioned, this necessarily isn't an issue for the Fayetteville Fire Department. This is an issue for our industry. We talked about that fire departments, you know, across the state I interact with, you know, all the time are changing their recruitment strategies. They're not relying just on open recruitment more. They're doing more targeted, specific recruiting, more accurately probably described as poaching. They're coming after our certified firefighters. We're cannibalizing, you know, each other. And I said, you know, we've got to be able to leverage this employer of choice initiative. I need some tools that I can go out and do some of the same thing. To offset some of the delayed training times that it takes for us to get firefighters ready and back to work. So I was tasked last year with coming up with some recruitment and retention strategies, what I did. I put together a working group within the fire department. We looked at other agencies, some things they offered. We did focus group meetings. We did surveys of our employees. We did stay interviews, and we actually made some recommendations, some strategies to incorporate in the FY24 budget. Unfortunately, they didn't make it in there. So when I come last year was asking, hey, I need some tools to actually do some recruiting. I want you to accept this information and receive it tonight with a little more urgency. I'm not as focused now or concerned with needing these tools for recruitment. I just need these tools for self-defense, you know, to keep others from pirating our people. So if you look at the slides up now, currently we have 7 vacancies. It doesn't seem like that big of a deal, that big of a number. We need to put some things in perspective. First of all, keep in mind, we majority hire our firefighters in tranches that correlates with fire academies. We started a fire academy in June, and we use an overhire strategy, up to 7 overhires when we do hire. So since June, not only have we consumed all of our overhires, we've also realized 7 vacancies. And why that's important is, keep in mind, we're not posed to take applications again until January. So if we take applications in January, these firefighters that will be hired in May, they'll spend 6 months in a fire academy. So we're looking probably September, October before we can actually get them out. We're trying to do some things now with certified recruiting. It's not been as successful as we want, but any vacancies that we can't fill now, we'll carry these vacancies all the way to next October before they're effective. And also we'll see just in a minute that we're experiencing about 4 separations per month. You know, a year from now, that could be 50 firefighter vacancies we have if we're not able to provide some stopgaps and make this, you know, an employer of choice to make it more attractive so we can actually attract some certified firefighters. Another point of this slide I kind of want to accentuate or draw some attention to is operational vacancies. You'll see operational vacancies, we have 24 positions. This is at 17 firefighters that's in the recruit academy right now, plus the 7 vacancies. This doesn't count those on long-term military deployment, FMLA, the ones we have to let off, take vacation, ones that call in sick, ones that's off in training every day. So it's bigger than those 7 vacancies. It's more about how long does it take to get those vacancies filled. And the other point I want to make before I leave this slide is we talked before about the academy EMT classes, about a 6-month training program to get firefighters functional. we don't have a training staff. We're relying upon the community college to provide our training. So we can't just schedule an academy anytime we want to. So we are, relying upon their schedule. Now, they've been very accommodating to us and work very well together, but it's still, we have to work around their schedule as much as we do our own. This slide here, it talks about what I just indicated before. We saw last year the huge jump in our attrition rate, where we jumped over 4 separations per month. We were hoping that would slow down, but we know hope's not a strategy. And it's not showed any signs of slowing down yet. We went back and looked at this. I think this is 3 years of data of why firefighters were leaving. About a quarter retired, a little over that left and went to another fire department. 36% left the industry itself. 11 were dismissed with cause. If I was to retool this and take information from our exit interviews and say who left for increased salary and benefits, you'd have a large piece of the pie, about 65%. That's the reasons that they give for leaving. All right, just a little salary comparison update. We didn't stack the deck. We know we were the 6th largest fire department in the state. The methodology that we used, we took the 5 departments that were larger than us, the 5 municipal departments that were immediately smaller, plus the 5 departments that we've lost the most firefighters to within the last 3 years. We no longer refer to these as our peer agencies. These are our competitors because we're going after the same people. And just looking at the averages of this group, the average entry-level salary is over $45,000. Certified starting salary about $48,000. You can see right below we're at $40,000 entry level. Certified is actually about a little over 42. This slide isn't quite as up to date, but still about 42. The percentages are still accurate. We didn't look at every position, but we did benchmark starting. The company officer, that's the first supervisory position within the fire departments. 71,000 was the average of the group that we compared ourselves to. We're at 65. And deputy chief, the second position in charge, they're called different things in different fire departments, but you can see the average of 105, our position starts at 93. One thing that we don't have a slide on it, but it highlights another issue that we recognize within the fire department. If you look at the variance between starting salary and the top salary, and the different percentages there, you can really see how our salary structure is compressed, which is an issue that that we want to look at and getting addressed. And with that, I think that's all we have from the fire department slides.
We bring up Chief Braden. One of the things too that Chief Hill has made me aware of, and I want to thank the council's support for this as well, is Chief, what again is the percentage of firefighters who ultimately end up potentially with some form of cancer?
It's about 70% sometime. I'd made a statement before, it's profound. I've been asked to repeat it a couple of times. Firefighters don't go out in a blaze of glory like we see on TV. Firefighters die in hospice beds, often after retirement from occupational illnesses from exposures they have while they're working.
And so one of the considerations that we are researching, the city of Fayetteville, like a lot of municipalities and counties around the state, we at one time ended our retiree health care so that Chief Hill will retire with retiree health care, but I think it was sometime around 2011, 2012, maybe earlier than that, 14. We ended retiree health care. And so and I won't tell you how many of our former chiefs actually ended up and company officers, but it is a consideration, and it's not something that we have sat back as a city and not addressed. With the council support, we put in extractors and washers on all of and extra gear for all of our firefighters. So when they go to a house fire or something else, we have an ability to wash their gear so they're not having to wear that gear, and we are putting that as much as we can in our stations. But again, the issue that we're looking at around the state is some of the smaller communities are offering things like either some type of supplement for health or and we also ended our longevity around the same time. And those are things where when you look at the number of people who retired, 25% of our department in the last 3 years, if that was the window you said, have retired. Because the fire department was something where you may have started 18 to 21, 21 or so, and you retire. Those are things that when we go back and we take a look and with council support come back with some recommendations, those would be some of the areas that we would look at. And I think the chief, you may have had one or two others. We aren't settled on what we can afford, but I do know that we cannot afford not to look at ways to retain and recruit some of the staff. Chief, anything else before we bring up Chief Braden?
No,
I have a couple questions for him.
Okay.
Just to your point about the health insurance, another way that we're different, not also, only the increased risk, is firefighting is a young person's sport. Firefighters can't work till they're 65 years old and be eligible for Medicare. So there's a gap in there. We really need to look after our firefighters.
All right. I have Councilmember Ingram and Thompson.
Thank you, Chief Hill. This might be for you or the city manager. Did you mention that you needed us to approve some tools?
Not tonight.
Not tonight,
I just want the council to be cognizant of our need.
Right.
And as we start having budget conversations for FY25, 2027, we need to start programming some of these benefits in for the firefighters.
Right, okay. I was getting ready to wrap it up into a ask. Okay, thank you.
All right, Councilman Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chief, according to one of your slides, we're losing most of our firefighters to Fort Liberty. I think it's understandable because of the proximity that we have, but city manager, and you just broke down the salaries per, I think, the 7 to 8 cities, if I'm presuming right, and based it down to average salaries that way. Is there any way we can find out what's the average salary of Fort Liberty and match that salary so we don't lose all our firefighters to Fort Liberty? And Chief, would that slow down the process? Turn your mic on.
I think that Chief has that number, but I believe that the starting salary is upwards over 60.
Yes, sir.
Which is higher than what we pay our police officers as well. And but one of the things that we know is that's going to be we're getting poached a lot too, and the towns like Apex and Cary, they are how the work schedule works for fire department, how many days on and off that you can actually still live in Fayetteville or in Sanford, other places, and commute to Apex or Raleigh for a 24-hour shift and still make significantly more money.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Thank you, Chief. We have Chief Braden next. But Chief, I did want to say one thing, Chief Hill. So I'm looking at the entry level salaries. I mean, so that is a gap. 40,000 compared to 45 and 48 compared to 41. And then, of course, the deputy chief and the other leadership. So you said 60% of that pie chart. Now, I don't think we can really compete with Fort Liberty because it's federal treasury we're dealing with. But the other cities I'll be interested to see, and without Fort Liberty being in the equation, where that is. But would you say, are you all working on a plan to bring at least the starting rate up to a more competitive state?
We have a plan. Yeah, we do.
We
have recommended some of those numbers, but there's a little bit older data.
So the city manager has
Yes, sir.
your version of that. Okay, thank you. You had a question, Councilman Hare?
Thank you, Chief. Here before you all. And also, Council, I have a new business that has a ribbon cutting that I'm getting ready to slip out to go to do a ribbon cutting. But when we look at those items that you just spoke on for retention, and Eve even was mentioned about health, providing health afterwards, when do we start looking, when are we going to look at that? I mean, I know he mentioned it, and you mentioned some years, 24, 27, whatever you mentioned. When do we start looking at that, Mr. Manager? I mean, I guess for everybody. Well, and is it just going to be for our first line of defense, or, I mean, that's a...
Well, last fall, gave direction to police chief and fire department for us to start looking at the recruitment and retention issues. The fire department prepared a variety of scenarios, as did the police department. But given where we were last year with the budget constraints, they were unable to present them to council in depart for the budget. And that's when we said we would come back to you after the budget was adopted. Our goal tonight is to bring it to the floor, make you aware of the concerns, all that we're doing to try to hold it together. But we will need some guidance from council probably in November, December, when we start looking at your strategic planning session. The numbers are astronomical for some of the things, and given how we have to do things as Director Clip talked about across looking at the entire organization, it's not enough to say we can offer a benefit to the fire department alone. You may have to, so we have to be creative about some of the benefits, but clearly if you tell someone you worked for me for 30 years and by the time you're 51 you may have an incidence of cancer, you're too young to go for Medicaid, Medicare, and you don't have retiree health care. Those are not things, and your top salary, if you're a firefighter and not move up into a line officer, your top salary turns out to be what, 60?
Yes, sir, mid-60s.
Mid-60s after 30 years. So I appreciate y'all's attention, and I knew this would be the reaction we have, and we want to bring it to you in enough time so that staff can work on it and we can bring it back to you sometime, hopefully in late November or December, as we can consider. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
All right. Thank you, Chief. Chief Braden.
So my presentation will mimic the fire chief's presentation in a lot of ways. I did the same comparison with the cities so that we get a real-world analysis there. But I'd like to start with our FPD current staffing. As I referred to the slide, you can see our budgeted for sworn is 431 allocations for sworn police officers. Our actuals are at 374, and we have a total of 57 vacancies at this time. Communications, we have shown a great improvement in our staffing and communications. At one point, I believe it was in late 2021 and mid-2022, we were upwards of a 50% vacancy rate in our 911 communications center. So that's just the state of the department as we sit currently at the Fayetteville Police Department. Turnover rate by fiscal year. I went back 5 years. This data was provided to me from HR. And just to show you the trend lines of the rate at which people were leaving over the past 5 years. If you look, we started back in the 18-19 budget. And, you know, that's when we see the sworn employees begin to rise along with the dispatch. Actually, non-sworn employees were actually on the decline back then. We had the height of our problem with the turnover rate was probably around that 20 to 21 beginning of that fiscal year, and then you see the rates for the sworn and the dispatch to begin to begin the decline cycle. But that's when we actually see the non-sworn actually go much higher than the trends for the sworn and the dispatch. But just to give you an idea of how we've been battling with the turnover rates over the past 5 years, it's almost been a constant struggle since 2019, 2020, constantly recruiting, retaining, training, and getting new employees put into place so they can do the job in the business of the police department 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Sorry. Reasons for separation, much like the slide presented by Chief Hill. I only did 1 year. There was a total of 98 people within that 1 year. And my logic behind doing the 1 year, I want to take out the anomalies that led to that trend, that line trend, where we were at the height around that 21, 22 mark. I want to show why in the past year, as we're on the decline of people leaving, what the reasons are right now. If we look, you know, better opportunity. That's the employees that are just telling us straight out that, hey, I'm leaving for better pay somewhere else. The biggest chunk of that pie is going to be personal reasons, and I would be willing to say that odds are that better opportunities exist in a lot of those personal reasons that the employees just unwilling to disclose at their time of departure from employment with the Fayetteville Police Department. But you can see that much like the graph or the pie chart for Chief Hill, that better opportunity and personal reasons encompasses the greatest amount of that pie. Looking at our peer city comparison, the Fayetteville PD starting salary is 16.5% lower than the average, the peer city average, which would equate to about $50,681. If you look, I've started, again, we took the top 10 cities in the state of North Carolina, plus the ones that we're losing employees to. If we put them in that ranking order, Cary has the highest starting salary, starting at $61,776, and Fayetteville ranks number 13 on that list, with a starting salary going to the academy at $43,000 a year. Our peer city comparison, not only we took a look at our officer level, the sergeant level, lieutenant, captain, assistant chief throughout the ranks. As you can see, the greatest disparities lie on that sergeant rank and below. There's a senior officer position in there. There were several of our peer cities that had basically a rank structure where a senior or a master officer was factored into that, which allowed for some movement or growth by our employees between the rank of officer and sergeant. Currently, the Fayetteville Police Department doesn't offer that program, but it's something we'll probably research and make recommendations in the future about. But as you see, the greatest disparities in our current salaries and based on our peer city comparisons lie at that officer and the sergeant levels. So just taking a look back to recap the things that we're looking at, you know, retention does remain an issue within our department. The more people I can retain, the less people I have to recruit. But as you can see, when we compare ourselves to our peer cities, and if we're using the analogy that Chief Hill did, is we're in a competition with our peer cities to make these hires and get these people into our doors. I've referred back to the ranking that we have amongst our peer cities, being the 6th largest city and ranking 13th in the overall outcomes of how we pay our officers. All right, I'll turn it back over to Mr. Clip.
Thank you. And I'm going to go back to an earlier slide that I neglected to talk about, that I want to be sure to talk about. And
that's
this
why
one.
you're finding out with Jerry as well. I know that we are getting ready to lose some council members who have other potential engagements. And so if we can, we do want to leave time to see if there are any additional questions before we get to that, Mayor, if that's okay with you.
We got Councilman Benavente, but if you can quickly do it, I know we have one other item to cover, and we're trying to be mindful of everybody's commitment.
So this is the employer of choice framework that we created soon after I got here, and that you all, most of you anyway, that agreed to. And so we have our employee value proposition and our vision up here, but these are the pillars that we know are important to employees in an organization. And so what I'm going to do now is switch again to summarize the recommendations here tonight. So, one of the things that we want to do is reevaluate the current recruitment strategies that we have. I think one of the chiefs mentioned that we want to be more focused and directive into how we recruit for folks to enter these positions. So we want to take a look at that. We also want to monitor and maintain market competitiveness. We've heard a lot about that from both chiefs tonight, and we want to be sure to monitor that and stay on top of that. I will say this, that in my opinion, my philosophy has always been that money isn't everything, and that's why we're talking about these other things here tonight. But we have to be competitive, okay? Culture, in my opinion, is probably the number one keeper of retaining employees here. So that's why a lot of these other suggestions that I want to talk about tonight, and focus on employee engagement and feedback. You know, we just had meetings with the police chief, with some of my staff, to talk about communication and listening to their feedback and having that conversation with them. In the fire department, we had we had stay interviews with them, and we went to Chief Willett and gave some themes that we heard as we spoke with some of the firefighters there. So we also want to implement training and development opportunities, especially in leadership. They didn't talk about this tonight, but we have very young leadership in both of these departments. So we really want to kind of focus on that as well. and then reevaluate the current annual evaluation process. It's not meaningful to many of our employees, especially those in the fire and police departments, so we're looking at trying to see what we can do about that. And if you'll notice that each of these suggestions fall under one of those pillars under the employer of choice. So, what questions do you have?
Councilman Benavente.
Thank you, Mayor Colvin. Are we calculating the cost of living in some of those peer cities compared to Fayetteville when we talk about adjustments to the starting salary?
Thank you. Yes, we are. We actually signed a reinstatement paper for one officer very recently who left to go to another city and then realized they could not find housing. But one of the challenges that people who have looked for housing in Fayetteville know as well, that it's no longer an $800 apartment that's adequate either. It can be upwards of $1,000. And so sometimes the housing does help us retain some employees when they go and look for other places, but it is also a challenge to try to bring people in. But it is a consideration that we look at.
And I'm going to pronounce it wrong, Mr. Cleach? Clip, sorry. Mr. Clip, I think you said this in a previous meeting. You guys don't wait until folks are ready to leave a department before you kind of have these like periodic interviews about, hey, what's keeping you here? Or could you say more about that process? Because I feel like you talked about that before.
Yes, we have talked about that before. A lot of organizations rely on exit interviews. That's as people are walking out the door. We prefer to do stay interviews. And we did that with the fire department just recently. So we can be a little bit more proactive, understand what themes might be happening in the departments. Yes.
Can you say at all, because, an analogy that I have is that we don't expect EMS to do heart surgery on somebody. They're there to stabilize, get someone to the hospital so that the experts can take it from there. I think sometimes we set our officers up for failure when we're expecting them to do more than they're trained to do or more than they're able to do because their training is to, again, stabilize the situation and respond to an emergency. If there were some, we're talking about OCS, we're talking about some other programs, do we talk to our officers about some of the things that they feel like is not what they signed up for, that they're expected to do, or perhaps, again, things that they feel like, you guys are setting me up here for failure. If you expect me to have to do all these things, I'd rather go to maybe another community that has those things already, and I don't have to worry about having to do everything. Is that ever a conversation that comes in those interim meetings?
Yeah, we've had those kinds of conversations, and what I'm finding is that, again, it's a young leadership. So what we're trying to do is provide a lot of education and training to leadership in both of those departments, as well as all of our other departments, to help them understand what it's like to be a leader, or what are the expectations of being a leader in the city of Fayetteville. So I think that's a key thing, in my own opinion. That we hear a lot of. That's why, communication, that's a basic thing. The police department, we're tackling that issue right now.
Chief, is that maybe something you'd want to share any insight on? Like maybe when they're leaving to these other bigger cities that are certainly paying more, they're probably also not left to sort of have to do as much as well.
So I give the analogy that I was once given. You can pay me well and treat me bad, or you can treat me good and not pay. But the key is to find that happy medium.
Sure.
It's tough to say. Money is the number one driver when we talk about people, why they have left or why they have come back. What are their ability or their means to survive and do. I can tell you this: when you break down a $43,000 a year pay package to 26 pay periods, it comes out to roughly about $1,700 a month before, or pay period before taxes. By the time you take taxes out, we're bringing home what, $1,200, $1,300 per pay period. If the average two-bedroom apartment is going for about $1,200 a month, that's what I looked up, and I was able to, do some research on here locally in Fayetteville within a decent area. That's one of your paychecks for the month. We haven't paid a car payment. We haven't done daycare. We haven't put food on the table or gas in the car. So these are all considerations that people look into. But right now, like Chief Hill stated in his presentation, it's a competitive market. It's almost like the housing market. People who are willing to pay are getting the people to come to where they're at.
All right. Thank you, Chief. Mr. Clip, that's it? Thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you so much, Chief Hill, Chief Braden, Mr. Clip. Council, as we move on, just before we look to wrap this up, one of the other main goals was to bring a few proposals and ideas to you for your consideration. As we know, as we talk about public service and public safety and how big of a comprehensive initiative that is undertaken, we realize certainly, as we've heard tonight, there are many players involved with this. There are social programs, there are judicial, and then there's the community as well as the city council. You know, as much confidence as I have in the chief and his team, very talented. I know that you all cannot solve this in and of yourself alone. If we had 0 vacancies and we paid the top rate, including matching Fort Liberty, I just don't believe you have the ability to solve it just in this chamber right here. And so with that being said, I wanted to, council, for your consideration to bring you up to speed on a conversation I had with the Metro Mayors Coalition, which included mayors from Charlotte, Raleigh, Durham, Greensboro, Winston, and Asheville. We put our heads together to deal with a lot of the urban problems that we see here concerning gun violence. And there were a number of things that came out of that conversation that would, there was a consensus amongst the coalition to come back to our boards to ask our legal departments, our city attorneys, to work to do some different things. We are in a different time, so we have to use different strategies than the traditional ones. And this was more of a proactive accountability encouragement for public safety. And that included, as we heard tonight, there's an opportunity for businesses and business owners to be good stewards in this community, participate in the camera programs. Those are the kind of things that we encourage them to do, as they are good stewards. But in addition to that, there are a number of operators in our community that hit the list of high calls of service. They are, you know, for a better word, hotspots. You know, I had some data pulled, and there are some who have upwards of 650 calls in an 18-month period or so for calls of service. And there are all kinds of things there that I think lead in and feed this issue that we're talking about. So one of the things that we could, if you would consider, step one was to create more accountability with what we consider nuisance properties. If they could identify to us the top 10 or 15 places that they respond to regularly, of course we encourage the business owners to do what he can to bring their operation back into a good standing. But if not, that there may be some civil opportunities or options that the legal department can tell us what we're eligible for. The other was the parents. We heard a lot tonight about these kids and what this generation thinks, but I think a lot of this battle, this war will be won at home with the parents and their participation. And so how firearms stored, we talked about that a little bit earlier in some of the council meetings. What's the chain of custody from those who legally purchase these weapons to how they end up in the city streets involved in things? Do we have straw purchases taking place in our community? Do we have people buying guns for other people and distribute them? And how those folks play a role into our overall problem to try to combat this? And do we have any businesses and gun shops that can help us look out for those type of things that may lead and point us to the straw purchases? So, you know, if legal could tell us about what role they could play, some of the people who touch these things, these weapons. You know, Councilmember Ingram brought up an interesting point about the gaming of this generation and the ability to use and download programs to make these switches on if they have a 3D capable printer. You know, are the software companies liable in any way if there's an incident in our community? How much are we spending? That's why I'm interested to hear what the cost of gun violence is to us, to your resources. Should the taxpayers of Fayetteville fund software that's downloaded and it ends up involved in an incident? And so some of the civil options that we have, you know, some things just didn't change until people had to start writing checks. Big tobacco several years ago. Opioids had to write a check before they really got serious about not distributing this poison into these communities. So I think we're on the reactionary side, but these could be some civil options that we, particularly if we have a coalition of the resources and the legal knowledge of these other cities in North Carolina. I did speak to the Attorney General's office, who was willing to lend us some of his legal mind to see if it's something that we can do. And then finally, I have sent a letter to the Housing Authority, Ms. Weeks, just to ask Ms. Weeks if she can report back to the properties that the Housing Authority has and some of our other community partners here that provide housing, what they can do to help us mitigate and to cut down on some of the number of incidents that take place in their place. Do they have a zero tolerance policy for shootings and violence and illegal weapons? So what role do those things play, particularly people who come in to ask for the taxpayers' dollars? You know, we have some very great developers that come in that look for partnerships all the time. The federal government attaches strings to our money. Do we attach any requirements or strings to the resources? So whatever we're legally able to do, wanted to get a consensus from you as a board. If we could allow the legal department and Ms. McDonald, and I'll give her another little special tribute in a moment, but her department, her team, to work with the legal departments of the other cities in the coalition to see what our options are. So with that, Council, I'll open it up for any questions that you have. Councilmember Ingram and Thompson.
We were motioning and
Okay. All right. Councilmember Benavente, question?
I guess I just want to clarify first, in addition to those recommendations that came out of the mayor's coalition meeting, are we going to have an opportunity to discuss some other things as well, or is this the time to?
These were proposals I brought to them, but yes, this is for all of us. Like, you know, any ideas that the council has that we can do to mitigate.
Yeah, I've got a couple I want to share with the council, but I think we should vote on yours, and then if there's an opportunity for me to come in afterwards, I'll do that.
Okay, thank you. All right, so Councilmember Ingram. All right, so.
Yeah, motion second, and for me and Thompson.
Okay, so this is a consensus motion by Councilmember Ingram. Well, this is a formal meeting. So this is a motion by Councilmember Ingram, seconded by Councilmember Thompson to allow the city attorney's office to work with the other city attorneys to engage in some different strategies to bring back to the city council for implementation. Any discussion on the motion? All right, council, I'll look to you for action on that. All right, Madam Clerk, that's unanimous. Thank you, council members. Councilmember Benavente, you had something?
Thank you, Mayor Colvin. I sent over to you and to the city manager Mothers Against Gun Violence. There's also Every Town for Gun Safety has sort of a menu of things that other municipalities specifically have done across the country. And I know, you know, our state is very unique, and we certainly have some things that we can't do because of preemption at the state level. But if those recommendations, there's about 3 of them that they have, we know that maybe 30% of our homicides are intimate partner, domestic violence related. They have municipal level legislation that exists. We talked a lot about gun safety and locking guns. They have an ordinance where if you sell weapons in a particular city, you have to have outside of your front doors, legible from a certain distance, information about if you have children in the home. It's 30%, you know, whatever the percentage is, more likely that if you don't have a secured gun safe, they're going to hurt themselves. If you have suicidal ideations, because we know about 20-30% of our homicides locally are self-harm, call this number before you walk into the store and buy this weapon. You know, these are just some examples that were on that menu that I think that our staff ought to look at, again, to see whether or not the city attorney's office is comfortable saying that, hey, considering what we can do in North Carolina, let's look at options 1 and 5. In addition to that, at our last meeting, I talked about it previously, I've met with young people, middle school to high school, in some of these mentoring groups that exist. And one thing they keep, the constant sort of theme in the conversations always ends up being, Mario, you're talking about all these de-escalation techniques. What is that? What are you talking about? We don't do that. My mom said, if someone hits me at school, I hit them back. I'm not going to tell the teacher because then I'm going to be looked at like a loser or a lame. So either way, I lose. What are we doing to connect with young people when we aren't Cumberland County, we aren't the commissioners, we're not Cumberland County schools, but we see a lot of these young people in our city rec centers. We have we have directors at these rec centers that know these young people. We have coaches at these rec centers that know these young people. Toolkits exist where programming once a week, to work with kids, role-playing some of these de-escalation techniques. If we made a concerted effort to do that, and I know that right now our programming generally only goes from, to the high school age, there's some 19, 20-year-olds that still hang out at Smith Rec Center that could really benefit from this. And if you bring pizza, they'll come. Get them a bunch of Gatorade, they're going to go play basketball afterwards. But if they can spend 30 minutes with someone directing them on some of these topics, I know these toolkits exist. We don't have to start from scratch. I think if that would be just be something our assistant city managers could probably look into as well. So I wanted to offer those considerations also as we try to tackle all of this.
Thank you, sir. Any ideas that work? Councilmember Ingram.
Well, yes, I was gonna. That was for a second, Councilmember Beneviente.
Okay.
But I will say to that your latter point, in my perspective, if council doesn't agree, I think that's what we did the mini grants for, is for them to go into these communities and help. Now, I don't know if that was a part of, some of the lists of what they could do. I would love to see that. And I even think Councilmember Banks McLaughlin brought up, if you're getting a mini grant, you use the rec center for free. You should be able to be able to support that. But to your point, that's pretty much why we really went into the mini grant focus, to be able to do that. So I think what you're saying, getting with our marketing team and really pushing that to find that where they can come in and do that. So it's, once again, not on the police department, but it's on these community members that can have that conversation since they are in our rec centers.
Clarify my position. I'm at the point where if we've got I don't know, most rec centers have 2 or 3 people that work there, on different shifts. Do we need to hire a fourth? And that fourth person is just going to be in charge of running some of this programming that we identify. I'm not saying that I want that right now. I'm saying the staff should come back and say what's feasible and what that would even look like. If we're saying that the whole point of the gun violence, the cost of gun violence study, honestly, y'all, was to paint a picture for this board and for the city to realize how crazy the cost truly is. The city who did it, it was San Jose, California, and they found out that the status quo, if we don't do anything this year on gun violence, it's going to cost the city $100 million anyways because of the impacts on our healthcare system, judicial system, families, losing jobs, just all of it totaled together. We're losing hundreds of millions of dollars. So they're 4 times our size. Let's just assume that it's costing our city $25 million a year to just keep doing what we've been doing. With that number, how much does it cost to have an extra director at a rec center, at all of our rec centers? Probably less than 25 million. So we might be encouraged and pushed to want to invest in something that will have a huge return because it's going to be cheaper than 25 million, and we might actually make an impact on this issue. So I want the gun violence study because it comes with a lot of other tailored recommendation from experts. But the whole point of it, maybe we already have the motivation. Maybe the crazy things that happened at Smith Rec Center that other week is the impetus, and we may not, I'm saying let's get the study, but we may not even need it if everyone here is motivated to make the investment now. So let's do it all like you said, Mayor Colvin. I was just afraid that if we didn't have the study, that everyone would be pinching pennies and wondering whether it was worth it.
Right. Thank you. Councilmember Jensen, and then Banks McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just going to make a quick statement. I think we're all saying the same thing up here. I think the biggest thing that we have now is we say we can hire someone else. Yes, we can, but the issue is now there's not people out there where it's hard to find people to work. I mean, I think we're in a difficult situation here because there are grants out there, there are things out there. It's just getting people to come and do the job. But with that being said, I agree with what you're saying. I agree with what Councilmember Ingram is saying. I agree with what the mayor is saying. But we cannot do it alone. And I'm going to say it again. We have to have the conversation like we're having right now, and we need to bring the county in. We need to bring the schools in, because we all know that it is youth and it is a culture. So we all need to be working together and not in silos, that we have the rec centers. What can they bring to us that they have the knowledge of to help us? And our police cannot do it by themselves. We all agree with that. This is going to take the whole county for us to be able to put a dent in this and get out of this Tier 1 situation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Banks McLaughlin, and I'll come back for a motion if y'all have anything else.
Thank you, Mayor. Just like we mentioned, we know that there's more than one solution. It's not just one solution to try to combat with gun violence, and especially with our youth. I think we need to start, because since we're waiting on a study, possibly create like a task force or a board and bring, just like you mentioned, council lady, as far as the school board, the our county, someone dealing with mental health, victims, family victims, just a community to come and sit together and come and be creative and bring our different ideas, and in the midst of all that, utilizing our recreation center, because again, we're already paying our staff as it is. So I think we need to try to bring people that's in a community and start a, just like I mentioned before, maybe a board or a task force to bring these ideas to try to resolve these issues.
Thank you, Councilman Banks. Councilman Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to try to give a little small testimony real quick, if you don't mind, Mr. Mayor. Most of you know that I'm from Philadelphia. I grew up in the 60s. I grew up on the rough side of town, and I was involved in a lot of things, and a lot of things. And I wanted to mention that because as we was upstairs, I think it was me and Councilman Mario and Banks McLaughlin, we was upstairs just before we came downstairs. And I forgot the conversation we was having, but it was mentioned by me that we have a lot of great leaders in the city of Fayetteville because of the things that was happening in our community. Growing up in the streets of Philadelphia, you need people to change your lives. You need people to renew your mind. You need people to give you an extra chance. If we don't get these pastors, community leaders, fire and police chiefs to get out in these communities and tell these kids that has an option, that this is the best option for you if you want to succeed in life. And Mario, I'm going to give you kudos. You and Shaquille Ingram both. There's young people out there saying, wow, at the age of 30, I could be a councilman. But you have to start off by doing the right thing and not going down that path of violence and guns. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, guys. So I'll go to you for action on the request to add another aspect or separate component as mentioned by Councilman Benavente.
Yes, Mayor Colvin. Just to simplify the motion, the Everytown for gun safety recommendations, which I'll make sure that the staff gets, and then potentially just looking into some toolkits to help our rec leaders.
So what, we haven't seen that part. What are you saying, that that's the San Jose study?
No, sir. The Everytown for Gun Safety has just a menu of things. It's just like you mentioned with the Mayor's Coalition, and then the staff can say what may work.
Okay,
right. So they can choose what look. I gave you the example of the sort of the cigarette warning in front of places as an example. But no, yeah. So just they'll look at that, and then also a toolkit. Like I said, there's groups that, again, have put together, packaged it. Just go through this slideshow with these young people, do the exercises, and give them a chance to work through it. It would be up to staff to say what the best way would be to implement that. Whether, again, it's through our rec centers, through our current directorship, hiring someone specifically to do that in all of the rec centers. I think that the gun safety, the cost of gun violence study is important because it's what's going to help us convince the county and our other partners that this is a problem. But I'm glad to see that all of us on this diocese recognize it already and are willing to make the initial investment so that with our partners can scale it, to be much more impactful. But I think we should start now, even as we wait for that study.
Right, and a part
with
of that
the task
was
force
also in addition to the task force. So there's a motion, Councilmember Benavente is seconded by Councilmember Ingram, I think. All right, any discussion on the motion? All right, council, I'll look to you for action on that. All right, Madam Clerk, motion carries 7-0. Thank you, council. Thank you for joining us, city, and we've got work to do. Motion to adjourn? All right, yes. Oh, wait a minute. Before we adjourn, I know we've formally adjourned. Ms. McDonald, stop hiding behind the desk. Stand up. Miss McDonald is leaving us, y'all, but she's going, I won't say bigger and better things. She's going to another place, but we're going to miss her. She's given us 21 years in the city of Fayetteville. She's kept this council out of trouble a lot, and others. So, Ms. McDonald, thank you on behalf of City Council, on behalf of the citizens of Fayetteville, and personally, thank you for the work and the time that you rendered to the city of Fayetteville. Thank you to your family for loaning you to us during these long Monday night meetings and Wednesday night meetings, and it's just amazing how time flies, because I remember your kids were small and now you've dropped them off at college. But thank you. We wish you nothing but the best and a lot of success in your future endeavors. She's going to be new city attorney in Raleigh, and so we are losing our talent. So I'm going to tell Mayor Baldwin to stop poaching my people, but we wish you well, ma'am.
Thank you, Mayor. It has, as I shared with the council on Monday night, it has certainly been my honor and my privilege to serve the city of Fayetteville, the citizens here in my hometown. I am not leaving. Fayetteville will always be in my heart, and I will be in this seat until September 13th.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, council, have a good evening.